There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Catherine Wood, and I'm the Executive Director at the Prairie Center for Ecumenism. I would also like to introduce to you the Reverend Dr. Sandra Beardsall, Professor Emeritus of Church History and Ecumenics. We have been working together to provide an ESM toolkit to the Prairie Center for Ecumenism's website. The toolkit provides resources to help learn about, develop, find, and troubleshoot local parish ESMs, and will explore different facets of ESM life in Canada. We are very grateful for her support and contribution of her work that has made this such a valuable resource across the country. We're excited to be here today for this Meet Some Practitioners conversation between a panel of folks who have been involved with ecumenical shared ministries in many ways. The purpose of this conversation is to provide a resource on our website in the ESM toolkit for those who are considering ecumenical shared ministries. Our panelists today come to us from different roles in ministry, such as oversight, clergy, and lay people. They are here to share their experience and offer advice for those considering ESM partnerships. I'm going to turn it over to Sandra to ask our first question.
Well, I guess our first question is for people to introduce themselves just briefly. Who are you? Where are you located? And what has been your role in ecumenical shared ministry? And so I'll use my screen as I see it, and the first person is Anne Salmon.
So I serve Anglican Lutheran shared ministries, and I was the pastor priest in a shared ministry in Ottawa from 2008 to 2013, and the pastor priest in a shared Anglican Lutheran ministry in Edson, Alberta, from 2013 to 2017. And from 2017 to 2020, I was a teacher at the Lutheran Theological Seminary in Saskatoon, where occasionally my classes included Lutheran and Anglican students. In 2020, I retired from ministry, but nobody ever really retires from ministry. And I'm now serving 3 small rural congregations outside of Saskatoon. One is mostly Anglican. The other 2 are Lutheran and Anglican congregations working together. So in retirement, I also served as the interim rector at the Anglican Cathedral in Saskatoon, and I'm currently part-time interim chaplain at one of the Luther Care facilities in Saskatoon. So that's who I am.
Thank you, Anne. Right. Okay, Carolyn, you're next on my screen.
Carolyn? Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
I live in Spiritwood, Saskatchewan, a small community of about 1,000 people. And I am the church musician, and I've been, of course, on council, as we all are. I have been involved in our shared ministry for the last 25 years. We started out around the year 2000, sharing with the United Church, and then 10 years later, 2010, we joined the Anglicans. So we have 3 denominations in our community, in our church community that I am a part of. And I was part of the process in putting together the constitution for our church and all the obstacles that we encountered along the way.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Carolyn. And finally, Bishop Lynn.
Hi. So I'm Lynn McNaughton, and I'm the Bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Kootenay, which is the southeastern corner of British Columbia, 5 mountain ranges and several lakes in between. And I come to this long before I was bishop. I was part of the ecumenical shared dialogue between Anglicans and United Church, along with Sandra Beardsall. And after I'd been on for 2 3-year terms, then Sandra and I became the co-chairs, me, the Anglican co-chair, and Sandra, the United Church. So that finished in 2020, right about I think it was the last in-person meeting right before COVID hit. So I come with that passion, and it was part of the appeal for me of my call to be bishop in Kootenay. So Kootenay has had 3 of the longest shared ministries in the country. Celista is now much more than just United Church Anglican. It's kind of the community church in town. Naramata and Windermere Valley, both over 55 years now, they've been shared ministries. So they're in the process of renegotiating covenants after, as covenants need to be renegotiated as time goes on. And then two that started here, St. Mary's Sorrento, I'm not sure how old they are, also long-standing, and in the midst of COVID, Fernie and Kimberly completed different covenants. There's so many permutations and combinations of what a shared ministry can look like, and so they're in the beginnings, 3 or 4 years into theirs, and there are two other new, I won't say who they are, put no pressure on them, but two other small communities in the Okanagan who are looking at sharing a building to begin with, and then some other, how do we do this? So I just see it as it's such an important option for congregations in smaller towns who are like all the church looking at aging populations and diminishing numbers, and not being able to afford a minister or a priest. That shared ministry makes a lot of sense. But I think, although it may be driven by finances and numbers, I think that what I see is huge excitement about the possibilities that are there because of mission, because we share so much already, and there's new energy when we come together. So I just see those possibilities.
Wonderful. Thank you for your introductions. Now we have 3 different directed questions, just depending on your different contexts. So I'm going to ask Lynn her questions first. Lynn, as a church leader, why do you promote ecumenical shared ministries? And the second part is, how did you first get involved?
Okay. Maybe I've answered some of that already. I get carried away because I am super enthusiastic about it. I see so many possibilities. So I promote them because I see those as congregations try to figure out next steps of who we are in mission in a new time. That it's an infusion of new energy to ask the question of who are we as Anglicans and who are we as United Church, and what would it look like to be shared together. And yeah, suddenly, like in Kimberly, to suddenly discover that they have twice as many volunteers for everything that happens, that selling one building infused cash into both systems, that the United Church sold their build shares. Now it's half and half ownership. So there's more volunteers, but there's also finances that they can put towards mission rather than buildings. So it's that excitement of new beginnings, I guess, in a time when we need that, and a time to regroup and say, who are we? Which is what we need to be doing, and what's our local mission? They're rooted in local service. Sometimes they've been long-standing friends. They've sponsored refugee families together, maybe even with other denominations or other partners in town. So they have those relationships locally in a small community. So there's this, I guess it's the fresh energy around that. There helping people to discover that good ecumenical relations are built on friendships at the local level. And what I can do as bishop is do the encouraging around the adjudicatory. I mean, we just had a meeting of the ecumenical shared ministries across BC this week about filling out forms for both denominations, like the practicalities and trying to continue to figure out how to simplify that, how to have a good covenant so that people are clear, when issues come up, what do we do with those? I have a good working relationship with our regional United Church minister. Our territories overlap completely. So it's like every town in my diocese that would begin to explore a shared ministry, the United Church person is someone I meet with on a regular monthly basis to say, how's it going in the old shared ministries? Where's how can we support the questions that are coming out of the new explorations? So I just see that as a big part of that. People, yeah, there's identity questions that come up, like the Anglicans saying, well, what happens to our Anglican identity if we become a shared ministry? I think that's somewhere where I can really support people and say, you don't need to fear that. Here's how we build a covenant that, around worship, around governance. Um, they're not insurmountable obstacles to look at the worship. How do we deal with conflict in worship? Every congregation, I find myself saying that every congregation deals with that. Any Anglican congregation, there have to be ways to sort through those issues. So they're not big issues, but they're important, and I can support people in that. Yeah, I think I missed the second question now.
The second question was, how did you first get involved?
Oh, oh my, that's so long standing. You might have to shut me up if I start. I mean, I had a United Church father and an Anglican mother in a small town. That was a decision of where do they feel most comfortable. So I have grown up as deeply, deeply Anglican, knowing that if it had been a different small town, it might have been United Church, right? So, but I grew up in where town, in several towns around me. When I stayed with my grandmother in the summer, July was the month we went to the United Church because the Anglican minister was on holidays, and vice versa. They worked together all the time around those things. So I just and then in the 70s, when there really was a sense that the two denominations had to get together, and I went to Vancouver School of Theology for my theological training. It was not only Anglican United, Presbyterian, and several Lutherans. So there's always been a sense for me that this is a gift from God to work ecumenically. So and then I married a United Church person too. So yes.
That's great. Thanks, Lynn. Anne, for you, how did you first get involved in ecumenical shared ministry, and then what made it particularly attractive to you as a ministry, as a way of ministry?
So in 1985, I was fortunate enough to earn my Master of Divinity degree from a multi-denominational divinity school in the United States. And that's where I really began to understand how important it is to respect the theology and worship practices of many, many Christian denominations. So I was ordained in the ELCA, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, in 1988. And after the Lutheran Episcopal Full Communion Agreement was established in 1999, the rector of the local Episcopal Church and I started doing a whole lot of shared ministry work together. Then in 2008, the rector of that Episcopal Church and I were invited by the Diocese of Ottawa and the Eastern Synod of the Lutheran Church in Canada to come to Canada to start a mission congregation that was an Anglican Lutheran shared ministry from its inception. And that was the point where I fell in love with ESM work. That was it. That was it for me. I knew where I was going with my ministry. So the key elements that of ecumenical shared ministry that are most attractive, I really, really like working with congregations who feel like they're being dragged kicking and screaming into ecumenical shared ministry, or in it, and if they don't do it, they know they're going to have to close. And I love working with congregations like that and watching their attitude of defeat and scarcity turn into attitudes of joy and abundance, because it always happens. And second, I love creatively with multi-denominational worship resources, teaching ESM congregations to love each other's liturgy and hymns and styles of worship. I think that's really at the heart of a successful shared ministry. I did my GMIN work with Sandra, and it focused on the effect of worship in shared ministries. And third, and I came to this very late in ministry. I love working with small rural congregations that are on the brink of closing. These congregations so often have turned in on themselves, and they've been just they're so fearful of opening up their doors and doing anything in the community because they just fear of losing everything. And it's just, for me, such a privilege, a wonderful privilege to just go to work with these congregations and just open up the doors and let the people out, and so they can go to all those places where God is already just present and waiting for them. And it's just delightful to do that. And finally, I like being an ecumenical shared ministry cheerleader, especially in these small rural places. And the cheers kind of go like this: you are small and you are mighty. You might not have a lot of money, but you are rich in faith and full of spirit. And you might think no one cares about you, but really you are almost famous. And there's a story that goes with that was for another time. And the ministry you're doing with each other is an important model for the whole church. So that's my response to those questions. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And our last not quite last question, but Carolyn, we have two questions for you. Is how did you get involved with ecumenical shared ministries, and what do you love most about being part of an ecumenical shared ministry?
We got started out of necessity, but it wasn't driven by the minister. It was driven by the people in the congregation. Our Lutheran congregation had a pastor, and the United Church didn't have a minister for quite a while. And they just asked if they could come and sit in with us. And so that started the relationship. Then, as time passed, our building became difficult to maintain, and it was past redemption of being able to turn it into a good building. But the United Church had a better building than we did, so we picked everything up and moved over there. Over time, we never pushed anything too quickly. We always tested the waters first. We started using the United Church building, and but we had the Lutheran pastor. As time went on, even the United Church became difficult to maintain as a building. It needed a new roof, and but the Anglican Church was much newer. So we asked the Anglicans if we could go over there and use their building. And we actually sold the building, the United Church, to the museum for $1. So we still have that building. It's a lovely building with a stained glass window and very historic. And so we can visit it, and we do hold services there from time to time. So when we were worshiping in the Anglican Church, the Anglicans did not have a minister. So they welcomed us. And in many cases, that brought our families together as well. I was born Anglican, and I played piano in the Anglican Church for about 10 years, married into the Lutheran Church. So I went over there, played for them, was the church musician there and I still am. So now I've gone full circle, and we're back, and families are reunited in worship because some of my family members remained in the Anglican Church. So that, and other families as well. So that was a real plus. So as time went on, we felt comfortable with each other and felt it was time to have the conversation again. Of course, we had to go through the whole covenant process, and it worked, because by the time we joined with the Anglicans, we, as United and Lutherans, kind of knew the process. And we had the blessing of the large denominations. The Anglican Church said, yes, go for it, because we don't have a minister that we can supply the Anglicans with. So they were happy to know that their people were cared for, even if it was other denominations. So we felt supported. And in those 10 years of that process, we grew to know that all the obstacles that a person can go through to put it all together, but it was all positive. What I love most about what came of that was the great number of resources that we had to draw on once we all came together. More ministers to choose from, variety in the worship, and the conversations around our denominations and our worship practices. And people started realizing that even though they've done something a certain way for their whole life, there was another way of doing it, and it became evident that they rather enjoyed a new way of doing things in lots of cases. And of course, we have a larger church family and lots of talent to draw on. So now we've gotten beyond all the worries about worship styles and so on, and we're enjoying being a mission in our community. We are not caught up in trying to survive. Now we're caught up in spreading the word, spreading our mission in and around our communities. We have a lot to give to those in need. We have a used clothing store in our basement that was supposed to be a once in a while thing, started out that way just as a fundraiser. Now it has been a drop-in center for those in need. And that's our greatest love, is serving the community in that way, by giving things away and by selling things for between $1 and $5. And we also supply for many needy, shelter workshops, or sheltered homes, I'm sorry, all those places that need clothing and other items. And it's given us a real purpose in the community. And that gives us more, it strengthened us to do more. Conversations with Indigenous groups, expanding our musical experiences and so on. And we've been very lucky to have good leadership in our pastors. Another thing that I felt this whole process did for our folks is it strengthened us in our own faith, because we had to have the conversation around what matters. And the conversation went very deep. And now we feel that we are equal team players with the pastors that come in. They can call on us for help, and we can give them the support they need, because we have a greater knowledge of what it takes to put it all together and who we are, so that we can lead a new pastor down our path. And we feel that we are indeed a team, rather than sitting complacently in the pew waiting for the pastor to lead us. So I think that pretty much covers it.
Thank you, Carolyn. That's a beautiful story. and all of you, wonderful stories for us. So this is a question that anybody can jump in and answer. You've all encountered challenges, I'm sure, and you've alluded to some of those. Is there one that you could tell us about that you worked on and overcame, and how did you manage that? If there's one that you could name for us, and any one of you folks.
Do you want me to speak?
Sure, go ahead, Carolyn. Yes.
Okay. Well, of course, since we've been in this business for 25 years, we don't have the challenges that we used to have. Of course, some of the challenges was now we have triple meetings, triple paperwork. Not all clergy are willing to take us on. So we have to be careful that we choose the right person for the job and not, we don't alternate between denominations. We just advertise and interview, and it's got to be the person who's the right fit, no matter what denomination you come from. It took a lot of effort to sort out all the regulations and procedures for each church, but now we're up and running and we're pretty much knowledgeable about what we need to do to keep everything running, to keep the larger denominations happy with how we do things. Perhaps one of the interesting things, and it hasn't been a real challenge, but it's been something we need to be prepared for, that there are sometimes ministers that come in, for example, who are not used to leading worship in an Anglican tradition. And we do like to have, once in a while, for example, just an Anglican liturgy to just feel like we are recognizing that tradition. And if it's, for example, maybe a United Church minister that's come in and has never really experienced doing that, it requires a bit of knowledge as to the procedure of going through the liturgy and that sort of thing. So we help them out. And if they get a deer in the headlights look on their face, we just sort of help them know where to go and what to do to get through it all. So lessons learned over that time is to keep the parent churches informed of what's going on, especially if there's any major concerns or conflicts. And that sometimes can just mean sending a copy of the minutes of the meetings, just to keep them on board with how we're managing. Another thing is to have a support committee for the minister coming in, especially for the first year or so. Somebody that he or she can go to ask questions, and that we can have a good conversation going about how it should go. And I think that pretty much covers it.
Thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, it sounds like patience over the long run has really been
yes, and not wanting to push the issue. Let it sort of happen on its own, and just with encouragement.
Thank you. Yeah.
I might add that back in the 90s, the Anglican and Lutheran conversation was happening in the larger church, in the national church. And I think they saw this as something that maybe should happen in our town. And so the Anglican and Lutheran pastor got together and said, you two congregations should be doing this. And we weren't ready for it. We just didn't have our head wrapped around it or our hearts. And it never happened. And then when it came not from the top down, but rather from the congregation, and it just happened so naturally, we were ready for it and we could take it on, but we just couldn't take it on when we were suggested that we should do it. So that was back in the 90s. Things have changed, I think, in approach. And of course, it was a new thing to consider. So we weren't ready for it then. But I think that now that more congregations have done it, it might have been accepted more easily.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in?
Thank you, Carolyn. That sparks a lot of things for me about how do I support those things? Because yes, if the bishop suggests it, it's not going to go anywhere. When we had at our synod in May, we had two of the newest shared ministries make presentations about, and they made it clear that it wasn't easy to become a shared ministry. There was work to be done, and they also just conveyed naturally the kind of joy they had and the energy that all three of us have said that is sparked by working together. So that I think freed several people to ask questions about, well, how did you go about it, and how long did it take, and all of those things. So then when it is the idea of the local people and they begin that process, then I know that I can come in and support as the bishop. And likewise my colleague in the United Church, the regional minister. So one of the phrases that came out of a conference we had recently on missional imagination was, innovation, new things happen at the speed of relationship. And I thought, oh yeah, that's very helpful for me, because if you're building something, nobody can predict how long it's going to take or what comes up in a relationship, or sometimes things have happened way faster than I ever would have dreamt, and you can't control it. So when you feel easy about that, like, just explore, and then these are the next steps, and how do we support you? That takes the pressure off. So it's helpful to say, they're all custom designed in some way, every shared ministry. So, and even ones that on the surface look like United Church and Anglican, then you discover that there's some Lutherans in town and there's no Lutheran church. So they kind of find their way in there, and that automatically, again, brings a little bit of easing of kind of, I don't know, it's not the Three's Company, it's actually three augments the conversation and inspires some new way of something new in worship that actually eases the tension between Anglicans or Uniteds. So I mean, a lot of it is change management, and this isn't an easy time. We're all reeling from so much change in society, and change in our own, personal change, as well as change in local communities. So how do we, I find myself saying, fear not, right? Just like, how do we support people in the midst of change, and what is perceived as loss, and help people lament if there is loss, and then discover, most of what we care about in our community, as Anglican community, we take with us into a new shared ministry, right? So,
Thank you.
I guess for me, the biggest challenge, well, I want to build on something Carolyn said first. So I entered, when I started with Ecumenical Shared Ministry in Canada, it was very much a top-down thing. It was two bishops who didn't talk to each other all that often, saying that they wanted to have a shared ministry. Okay. And that was really, it was wonderful in its own way, because they kind of, once we got working on the ground, they stayed out of it and let us do what needed to be done with the people that we were sort of were part of it. But then another experience was obviously a completely different shared ministry thing, where there were two little congregations in a little town, and they wanted to come together as a shared ministry. So it was wonderful to do this on the ground work, from this bottom up work with them. And then as we got to the point where we were trying to keep the judicatories involved, but got to the point where we needed to have the conversation about some sort of a structure, like what would a governance structure look like. That's where we ran into just like an immovable wall with one of the bishops, who just didn't understand at all what was happening. And I understand that, because each bishop has its own hierarchy. They have rules, they have regulations, they have things that their denomination requires. And, Bishop Lynn, I just want to hoot and holler and say yay for you, because you know that, and it doesn't make you any less Anglican because of it, right? And so it was just so, there was just times when I just felt like I felt like if I could just pick up these two congregations and move them to an island someplace by themselves, just be amazing. But you talked to Sandra, you said the word patience. For me, it's always been persistence, which and another definition for persistence is just being a big pain in the neck. So it's just like this relentless, just like, nope, we got to do it. We got to do it. You're going to have to listen. You're going to have to think differently, blah, 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 on and on and on it went. But I wonder, I think things are changing, and they're changing because they have to change. I mean, congregations are too small. There's not enough pastors to go around, all of that stuff. And so ecumenical shared ministries that kind of start as like this last resort option. They almost always end up in this Easter place, this resurrection place, which is just so exciting and beautiful. And so I feel that change. I feel like it's getting to be way easier to work to bring congregations together in this ecumenical shared ministry relationship. And I just wonder what you guys thought of that. So
I think that having the covenants, the covenant was a lot of work. There was a man in the office in Saskatoon at Synod who had a lot of knowledge about it at the time. And so we would draw up a covenant as best we could, send it off to him. He would tweak it and then send it back to us, and we would tweak it. And then we'd have to send it off to the United Church, and they would tweak it. And you can imagine the months that went by. I think the process just with the United Church was probably at least a year from the beginning until we actually had a covenant. It takes a lot of patience. But by that time, the members of the two congregations began to feel like a family. And so we felt we had the perseverance and the desire and we knew that we had to have a covenant in order to be able to hire ministry. We had to have our ducks in a row and something clearly laid out. So we hung in there. And now, well, we've almost become, being able to give as I am today, lead the others into the same path. But it was relatively new when we took that on. There were not very many congregations at all that had a shared ministry going on. So we were breaking new ground in lots of ways. But I think it brought us all closer together because we really triumphed, And then when it was time to get together with the Anglicans, we pretty much knew how to put it all together, and it didn't take long at all.
Like what you just said about the struggle over the governance thing. I mean, that coming together with a joint struggle, that did more than that built the community just so fast and so quickly. It's like, yes, we're in this together, so kind of thing. So
yes. Yeah.
Well, and it is changing. I mean, half of the House of Bishops across Canada has changed. Half of them are different than they were 3 or 4 years ago. So it's a lot younger group. I'm saying I'm one of the oldest in the Canadian House of Bishops now. So there's a different sense of that, I think. More and more clergy who become bishops have trained in interdenominational schools. They've had far more exposure than previous generations did to ecumenical, interdenominational worship, all of those things. So I think, and we have talked about it in the Canadian House of Bishops together about how do we license, how do we, let go of some of the things that we might have held on more tightly before. So I think it is changing. And I'm doing everything I can to say it's doable. So
it's really hard to let go. It's really hard to let go of our the way we do communion and all those things. But not just the church makes us change. That pandemic really made us change.
Yes.
And receiving communion in a common cup was not very possible during COVID.
Yep.
And so we did things differently to be safe, and we liked it, and we are still doing it that way, and the Anglicans are fine with it as well. So we have the common cup sitting on the altar, and it's consecrated and so on, but we still are doing things so differently than we used to, and we're surprising ourselves.
Yes.
We're feeling empowered as well, because we realize that we do have a say in what matters and what makes us faithful and what feeds us. And the pastors are listening, the ministers are listening. And not everybody is on board with our new ideas, but most of them are getting on board now.
Yeah, Carolyn, I loved your question. You said, the crucial question is what matters? What matters? And coming up with, answers to that question that is respectful of the theologies of all the participating members of the shared ministry is, and being able to listen to those answers and then puzzle together how they fit together. That's beautiful, right?
Yes. Something rather funny when it comes to serving communion, to please everyone, we had all three styles of communion on the altar. And new pastors coming in were gobsmacked at how much work it was to consecrate and serve communion. And we said, well, we'll be there to help you. And we had helpers up there. We had 2 servers. And some people needed the common cup, and some people needed the individual glasses. And it morphed over time, and people settled. And now we do have the cup up there symbolically for consecration, but we just serve in small glasses now. And they're okay with that. I guess if there are times when they want the common cup, there are places and times that we can do that. But we're not closed to the idea, but it just, whatever is common sense and whatever feeds us and how we're fed in the end, it turns out that after trial and error, we're all okay with it.
Yeah, that's a really helpful observation, Carolyn. I think what I hear in that is radical hospitality to each other. And then if it takes a little longer to do something, but we're meeting the needs of several different people who have different sensitivities, then people are willing to do that. And in the end, you go, oh, maybe I don't need that, or maybe I'm okay with this. And I do think COVID changed us. We discovered we could change fast if we had to. I mean,
yes.
Fernie Shared Ministry started off with a covenant at the beginning of COVID that said we were going to share the cost of the minister/priest, but we're never going to worship together. And she moved to Zoom worship the minute COVID started, and within a few months they were going, well, we're never going back to worshiping separately after this, right? So it does shift over time. But
yeah, COVID was a game changer in one of the congregations where I am. It's just, you could not use the common cup. It was not safe to do that. And we went to a pouring chalice but the common cup was consecrated and then poured into, well, I couldn't get it into the little cups. So we have bigger things, then that's fine. But, they don't want to go back to the common cup because nobody feels comfortable with it. So, but what matters, the body and blood of Jesus Christ given and shed for you. Bam. Yes. That's what matters.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Such a great point. And I feel like this conversation it's been so wonderful, and it could continue to keep going and almost have to have a part 2 because it's just so great. But the whole what matters is just such a good good point. But to conclude, I think we'll just wrap it up here. I just want to express how grateful we are for your contributions to this conversation. It's been so excellent. Each of your stories is unique, and it helps us to hear the impact of real life experiences, and it encourages and inspires others who are in ESMs or considering that ESM partnerships. By listening to your stories, people can learn from your experiences and find hope and inspiration in their journeys in ecumenical shared ministries. So thank you. We're so grateful that you were all able to participate today. This is going to be a great resource for others. So thank you very much.
It's
Thanks all.
great to
Thank you.
You're welcome.